Hello everyone, my name is Ram. I live halfway across the world. I'm from India. And this talk is basically about what the OpenSSF has done in the past year and a half to really influence a lot of the work that has been going on in the subcontinent. And I just thought I'll share my story, or rather a collective story of everybody who's in the room and in the community. So talking about security in a land that has a lot of developers is not very different from this meme. Developers are always distracted and they always seem to focus on so many things except security. If there's a new language or framework, like if MCP came out or like an MCP 2.0 came out, I'm sure there'd be like 40 influencers with 90 videos on YouTube about how to do MCP stuff just from India. But nobody will ever talk about security. And if you notice, that's like on the top of things that people will just not talk about. There's so many things about security that I learned as I started to engage with the OpenSSF community. And what I found is that a lot of the people who are doing development and shipping something are at a very sort of, I wouldn't say a low level in the literal sense of it, but they're more in terms of focused on building something and shipping it, which is not quite the level that you want. And then when I introduce a lot of these terms to them and ask them about, hey, you're doing some open source stuff, how are you doing in terms of attestations and provenance? And they just seem to walk away. A lot of them are programming superstars, don't mistake me, but when it comes to security, I just can't seem to figure out a strategy to get to them. I learned the meaning of this phrase when I started to do OpenSSF work in India. And I felt very angry. Like, it made me really, I'd come back from like meetups and conversations and community work, and I would be frustrated about what am I even trying to do here? But I sort of didn't give up. And then there's all sorts of different maturity levels that different organizations tend to have and categorize themselves in. And we can make up a lot of fancy, colorful diagrams and pyramids to explain what these different levels are, what people do, blah, blah, blah. But okay, I'm glad the company logos didn't load. I don't want to piss off a lot of our sponsors and future potential members from the area. But it really didn't matter in my observation whether it was like a big company or a small one, if they had like a lot of years contributing to open source or if they were very new to contributing to open source. It was all over the place. And there was a lot of cowboy coding that I did not expect in some of these very mature organizations. But what really concerned me was that there was no trusting and collective and acclimating space for them to gather. And that kind of, was somewhat disgusting. Where was the sense of community in all of these engineers working together, and the lack of the ability for these people to come together in sort of an, open source security anonymous of sorts was just not there. There was no place for them to come together. And I felt kind of bad looking at that. And the other thing that that I also observed was when I started to work with the OpenSSF, a lot of conversations happened about how the government cares about supply chain security, for example. And there was like a presidential order with very specific information about what they wanted to do. It also happened in the EU. They had very specific sort of policy about what they considered supply chain security, how they wanted to design it, and things like that. And there's also evidence of Japan participating in a similar way. And this was India's response about supply chain security. And I hope I get let in through passport control when I go back. So please don't publish this video for about 48 hours. But the point is, it was totally zero. There was just nothing happening. And here I was learning about all of these wonderful things happening around the world, but it was just not possible to reproduce that in the geography. That left me sad. So technologically, I think the country is, fairly advanced. They're doing a lot of things. They're sending some spaceships and stuff. So I thought open source security would be a priority, but unfortunately, it just wasn't. And then lastly, the thing that sort of made me most wary was charts like these would come out and say, India is, topping the charts in contributors, and oh, you're really climbing up the ladder in terms of the volume of open source contributions you're doing. But they were doing all of this with zero awareness of security. So that's what really, put some fear in me. And I'm also part of a few other Linux Foundation projects, and I saw what Log4j did to the project and did to the community and did to all of these engineers. And thinking about the next supply chain attack that would come, and I think somebody wore a T-shirt this morning that really captured the essence, but it left me in fear of what was going to happen if the community did not come together and focus on security. So that was me at the end of most working days, not very different from what we've seen in a movie, but also what or who I was an eternal optimist. I knew that there were solutions, just in another part of the world, and I knew that it is possible to build a culture of security and make it net positive and really influence a lot of these open source contributors to think about the right kind of things. And that's me. So a whole array of emotions going through open source security and trying to get people to pay attention to this. And I don't think it's limited to humans. Honk agrees too. So Honk has the same set of emotions when it comes to open source security, I think. And so I really wanted to take the story of the OpenSSF. And I think Stephen captured it very well, both yesterday in like an internal staff meeting and at his opening remarks. But obviously, a lot of you were late, and some of you weren't paying attention. So if you weren't, this is a quick recap. So the first thing we wanted to focus on is obviously education. And, amazing response to the first set of courses. I wish Dr. Wheeler stuck around. I wanted the room to applaud for him. But anyhow, great response to the courses that we've had. A lot of people are looking for information, especially the AI flavor, I think, helps market it by itself. But also a lot of people are looking forward to any information that they can learn. The fact that it's free is amazing. The fact that it's got like a tiny certificate at the end that they can show off on LinkedIn and stuff like that makes it very endearing for the developer community in India. The next thing is the policy work. Like I said, there's not a lot of things that's going on. I'm trying to get together a certain cohort who can mimic a lot of the work we're doing in other geographies, but localize it to the context of India. Recently, there have been legislations around privacy, what we call the DPDP Act, or like the Digital Privacy and Data Protection Act. The country is sort of finally awakening in a sense. So I'm really glad, the framework is there. I used to work with this company in Estonia where one of their past prime ministers said, everything is shit, but that's the fertilizer that, we're going to build our farm on. So that's the sentiment I'm going in with. And for the sense of community that we're trying to build, there's a whole bunch of online and offline events that we're trying to set up. One sort of feeds the other, and it's really been getting a lot of good traction. We've after like a year and a half of doing this and about 25 streams later, we finally figured out, okay, these are topics that really resonate with the audience. Some of these are boring. I have to try and figure out what to do when power goes off sometimes. But it's been a fun ride, getting a lot of people to talk about these things. But I think the biggest strength that we have is our whole array of projects. So there's a project for every little thing that you want to do. We're not CNCF landscape level yet, but I think we'll get there soon. So there's a project for every single aspect of open source security. It's been very relatable once you speak to people and explain to them and go through the motions of educating them what it is that the OpenSSF really has. And I'd love to see this translate into a contributor experience as well for a lot of people that are just consuming these things right now. So a four-pronged approach, and that's tackling all of my emotions, helping me stay grounded, stay centered. And I also think that these four sort of feed into each other very well, and it's a great strategy for the next years to come. Lastly, someone mentioned this in the morning. I'd really love to see you come to India, work side by side with me. It may or may not be special, but it's excruciatingly hard. So any support we can get from the members, from others in the community who can sort of influence the developers there is extremely appreciable. Speaking of which, there's KubeCon in India happening. There's also an open source summit, but there's one area where we got our priorities right. We're doing security first, and then open source, and then the cloud native and container circus can begin. So I think it's a mark of changing times, hopefully. But there's a saying that flapping a butterfly's wings causes something somewhere else. Imagine what a whole goose dance can do. Thank you so much for being such a patient audience. It was lovely presenting my experience here. Big thanks to sponsors, big thanks to all of the members, and a big thanks to the folks at the foundation for enabling this. This is me on most social media. Please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy and open for having a conversation about what I can do better and what more I can do to help the local community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.